Hey guys, it's March 14th, and this is episode 7 of Q&A, Starcraft Q&A anyway, and I'm your host, Magnet, and this might be the worst intro ever, but we don't care. We'll just go ahead and keep going, keep plugging along, and start answering your questions that you guys have asked in the past week or so. So, here we are, and I decided to do this today because I will be out of town for a couple days, going to a nearby, really crappy gambling city to C311. So, anyway, let's go ahead and jump into the questions here. This person says, "Hey Magnet, I've been watching some pro games and I noticed that Life, when he is holding a push from Terran Bio, with Lingbane Muta, he's not sending all of his army at once, but he sends waves of units. Isn't that ineffective?" So, as a general sense, it is ineffective to fight with parts of your army, but Lingbane Muta is an exception because typically when they're playing Terran, they're going to be playing a whole bunch of Bio, like you said. And what you need in order to hold those bio pushes is you need good baneling hits. And a lot of times if you send your entire army, you're going to be sending your entire army into a field of Widow Mines as well. And if you lose a whole bunch of the Widow Mines, especially your banelings, then you just can't win the fight. So what he'll do is he will send forward maybe 6 banelings at a time and try to catch the Terran before he has his mines burrowed and while his army is still really clumped up to see if he can get some good baneling detonations. It doesn't always work, but a lot of times it does. And another thing that Life does a lot that not a lot of people even talk about, I haven't heard pretty much anybody talk about this, which is really surprising, is he will purposefully distract you on the other side of the map with say like his mutas or a bunch of zerglings or something, and then while the opponent's attention is off his main army, he'll just send in a whole bunch of banelings and usually get crazy connections because the other person isn't microing the army since they're distracted. So he does a lot of those type of tactics just to try to whittle down the Terran push, and it's okay if he's able to get those connections because you just need to do whatever you can to get the good baneling connections. That's usually a good way to do it. This person says, "I'm rather new and I have a question. If I'm forced into 2 bases as Protoss by Zerg and they have mass Zerglings and Roaches and Hydras, how can I force myself out? Thanks." Most of the time, if you're contained on 2 bases against a Zerg, you're probably already dead, unless they're also on 2 bases. So typically, all about PvZ is either you have to win on 2 bases, or you have to take a really fast third and you have to defend their attack. If you ever lose your 3rd base in that circumstance, then you're probably already dead. So this seems like one of those situations where either they're on 2 bases and you're on 2 bases, and in which case any sort of tech to answer what they have, such as Colossus or Blink or good attack upgrades or stuff like that, are all going to be good options. But if they're on 3 bases and they're containing you down to 2, that means that they're free to expand, they have a better economy than you. You're probably already dead at that point, so try to take faster 3rd bases, or if it is just 2 base versus 2 base, just play a more tech heavy style and try to counter what they're bringing out. Colossus are always a good option if that happens. This person says, they have another question. Was this the previous guy? No. I don't know where the other one was, but he says, "They play Wings of Liberty because I'm a new player and I'm not quite ready to spend $20 more on Heart of the Swarm. Here's the question. When Legacy of the Void comes out, do you think it'll be an expansion added to Heart of the Swarm or another expansion to Wings of Liberty?" They announced that it is going to be a standalone expansion, which means that you won't need to jump to each level in order to get to Legacy of the Void. So you should just be able to go straight from Wings of Liberty to Legacy of the Void. At least that's what I've read. This person, it looks like it kind of bleeds off the side, and I don't want to have to resize all of it, and I didn't realize this. I actually missed this guy's question from last week, but I'll just read this out really quickly. In general, the question is, they're in gold, they play really well against golds. Once they get into platinum, they have a lot of problems. They say that their builds couldn't work, they couldn't adapt, their APM was low. They're wondering what they could do to help out. So basically, if you want to improve your APM, you can, and I would just force yourself to try and minimize the time spent on each task. And I talked about that a little bit in the How to Be a Better StarCraft Player series, where if you have a whole bunch of basic tasks that you do all the time, which I think you're Zerg. I don't remember if it says here. Oh, I'm a Protoss player and 20% of the time I play Zerg or random. So, say for example for Protoss, you know you're going to have to place pylons, you know you're going to have to place buildings, you know you're going to have to warp in, stuff like that. Find ways to minimize the time you spend doing each of those actions. So, If you're warping in all the time, find a way to warp in like 10 units as fast as possible. Then that'll obviously increase your APM, because if you spend half the time warping in, then you have all these extra seconds to spend on something else. So that's a good way to start approaching how am I going to get faster at the game, is try to minimize the time you spend on any action. And it's mostly just muscle memory and getting used to it, stuff like that. As far as builds and playing higher competition, I always say this all the time, and that is that every time you move up a league or you play harder players, it's not just one thing that they're going to do better than you. They do basically everything better than you. So that means that you're going to have better macro, better scouting. You're going to have a better knowledge of the game in order to beat these people. You have to be able to improve in every single category. It's not just APM, or it's not just build orders and stuff like that. If you want builds that work at every level, you should look up either like imbabuilds.com. I have a few build order openers that'll put you in good places. I talk a lot about strategy in certain situations, so I would just watch some pro games and try to grab their builds, because they're proven to work at every level. If you're trying to craft your own builds, and as you say here, they're really well thought out and custom made, the problem is that a lot of people do think that they're really well thought out, and then they realize that they just lose to something they've never seen before. So you can get into this situation where you're like, okay, I made this build, it covers everything I've seen before, and then you start seeing things you've never seen before and you lose, and it's like, oh, I guess that build isn't as good as I thought. So if you want to be basically foolproof, just learn the ways that pros play, because they usually play in a really standard and really rounded way that'll cover everything that's possible from any skill level in any race. So I would just check out some pro videos. Look at sites like imbabuilds.com for build orders and stuff like that if you're looking to improve in that regard. Okay, same guy. This fits on the screen a little bit better. He says, in PvP I struggled going for Dark Templar. They managed to get detection right when I get there. So Dark Templar aren't designed necessarily to deal damage. They're an easy win against builds that don't check against them, say like a straight to blink build, or a 4-gate or something like that, or some silly build where they expand and just don't bother to get detection. They'll win against those builds, and that's basically your free win scenario. But the basic gist of Dark Templar builds is that they're going to get you an expansion at a very reasonable time. So you'll be able to expand with Dark Templar pretty much every time at about 6 minutes, a little bit past that. So that's their primary purpose, to open up that way. And the reasoning is that if they're so aggressive that they probably won't be able to afford detection, then you just win. If they're conservative and they get detection back at home, then you're about even on economy. Sometimes you can be a little bit behind, but then your transitions into other tech are a lot easier, such as Blink, or something like a Mortal Archon is really easy to get into. So it's a really nice, rounded way to play with minimal units, high levels of tech, and get a fast expansion down. So you want to approach it more as an expansion build rather than, I'm going to kill him with his Dark Templar. And again, there's builds all over for DT belts in PvP. This person says, how hard will it be to make that jump from Heart of the Swarm into Legacy of the Void in order to be the same level as you were before? You have to learn everything from the beginning because of the new changes, and will the tournaments be played in Legacy of the Void immediately after its release? I think, okay, this is my prediction for Legacy of the Void just because of the way Blizzard's been kind of behaving recently. What I think is going to happen is I think they're going to open the beta in the next little while. I keep saying a couple of months, which seems reasonable. I would say late spring is reasonable. And then I think they're going to stay in beta until the next new year. And the reason I think they're going to do that is because they center basically everything around WCS nowadays. And WCS will start a new season at the beginning of the year, and I think that will be, in this past season everyone got dumped out of their leagues and they changed the rules and all kinds of stuff. I think that's where they're going to be releasing Legacy of the Void, is probably sometime around Christmas time, especially since Blizzard likes money and that's when people buy games. But I think that's when it's going to happen. As far as learning everything, you'd be surprised how much people don't know about a new game. So the very beginning of Heart of the Swarm, it was like really easy to get a high rank because nobody had any idea what they were doing. And if you found a build that was really good, you could just use it and everyone would die to it because they had no idea what to do. So you're going to be on the same learning curve as everyone else will. It'll be a fun time where things that aren't supposed to work will work, so you can kind of goof around and try silly things. But yeah, you will have to relearn a lot of different things. The tempo is going to be totally different, but it's not like everyone else is going to know and you're not going to know. now, so you'll be totally fine. It'll be a good time to experiment. As far as the tournaments we play in Legacy of the Void, like I said, I think they're going to release it at a time where they reset the seasons anyway. So yeah, I would assume that beta will be going on while Heart of the Storm tournaments are still happening. But then when Legacy of the Void's finally released, they're going to switch everything over to Legacy of the Void, just to kind of keep in step with their WCS system right now. This person says, been a while. I never played Brood War competitively. Was the Queen's Infestation ever a thing, or was it just for show? It was definitely not a thing. Mostly because even those units weren't that good, and it took so many unnecessary steps just to get there. Zerg would be better off just worrying about killing you rather than doing that instead. Plus, Spawn Broodling was way more useful for energy than anything else was on the Queen, just to kill really important units. I'm not even sure if that was ever really popular. I didn't watch a ton of pro Brood War matches. I kind of got into Brood War at the very tail end of when it was going on. Anyway, so what are your thoughts about adding that ability to the Corruptors and allowing any non-Zerg buildings below certain hit points to be infested and to produce infested Terran or Protoss? I think that's a really cool idea, actually. It would definitely make people go out of their way to make Corruptors and try to center a strategy around something like that. Yeah, I don't have really any complaints about that. It'd be kind of like Zerg, if they still have the whole corruption where they can kill buildings or whatever, or at least hurt them, and then either take them over or do something interesting with them. That'd be cool. Maybe make them a spot that will spawn like broodlings every once in a while or something like that until it's dealt with. There's a lot of cool things they could do with it. I like the idea. So this person says, hey Magnet, :D, I am stuck in top diamond for a month now, place 1 to 8, and when I get to first place I just can't win anymore and lose 7 to 8 matches and then I rage. Double smiley face. Is it me, or does the game give me better opponents? Do you have any advice? I think a lot of people just place a little bit too much importance on getting a rank. I think you should just play and not care. Like, if you start to lose a lot, then, you know, take a break. But I was always under the mentality that I should try to play through my really bad patches of play, just because it will keep me a lot fresher for the next time that I play. So I think you can enter periods like that where you can just feel yourself playing badly and just say, you know what, I'm just going to play through this. I'm just going to learn as much as I can, and I know I'm going to lose, but at least the next time I come back, I'll have a much better kind of feel for the game, or at least that's my approach. But obviously, the more you win, the better opponents you are going to get. So honestly, I wouldn't worry too much about it. Just try to play through it, and then your brain has this weird way of, when you're under a lot of stress, especially thinking about something a lot, and then you give it a break and come back, it all of a sudden understands things way better. So this person says, I don't want to start a huge race argument, but how come Protoss never wins in the big tournaments? I feel like they don't even make it into high rounds in the tournaments. Do you think the reason is because Protoss is the hardest or most unforgiving race? In the sense that one wrong move and you're dead. So this is kind of funny because Protoss actually does win a lot of tournaments. I'm not sure what big tournaments you're actually referring to, because the biggest of big tournaments has always been GSL, and Protoss won all 3 GSLs last year. As far as like foreign tournaments like IEMs and stuff like that, those are a little bit harder to gauge because there's not as much preparation that goes into it, and Protoss by far benefits from having a lot of preparation and being able to plan out a series and throw people weird stuff they've never seen before. I don't think Protoss is the most unforgiving race. They're just the one that either benefits or loses the hardest because of planning. So like, if you plan a wrong build, or if you just flat out take a risk as Protoss, you'll be punished a lot harder than any other race, just because you've invested so far into it, considering the expense of units and tech for Protoss and stuff like that. So they're unforgiving in a sort of a planning and type of strategic type of way, but there are other races that feel a lot more unforgiving in other scenarios, such as like Terran. Like, if you're playing against a Zerg and you don't split your Marines properly and 3 Banelings can blow up your whole army, then you lose. Like, that's pretty unforgiving. ZVZ is especially very unforgiving. So I'd say you got the good end of the unforgiving part if it just comes down to planning and not taking risks. So this person says, hi Magnet, I have another question. When I play a Zerg, do I use the method of injecting that you showed in your macro video? I think that means I use the method of that. But if my opponent has killed one of my queens and I forget to try and inject, my queens just wander away and it's really irritating. Is there a trick to inject properly without 1 queen for every hatchery? So that technique, admittedly, is a little bit kind of suffers from losing one queen because your queens will walk around unintentionally. So what you can do that would really help out, and it's really common anyway, is just to have extra queens. So what you could do is, if you have queens out that are spreading creep, you could map those to your inject queens as well as your creep queens and keep them separated as well. So just in case one of your queens dies, one of your creep queens will walk back to the other hatchery and it'll already belong to that group. So there's a lot of builds that are really common in ZVT, ZVP as well, where you just keep extra queens around, not only to spread creep, but to help defend against some certain attacks. Because things like Speedling and Queen is really good against gateway attacks. Things like Speedling and Queen is really good against a lot of Hellion openers and Banshee plays in ZVT, so it's pretty common to have extra queens. I would just kind of double map your creep queens to both be inject queens and your creep queens, just in case you have any issues with that. The only caveat is that once one of your queens dies, you will have to remove them from the creep queen group. Otherwise, when you reselect, they might wander back out there and start spreading creep. But that's a good way to do it. Or you could just have an extra queen hanging out. Say you have 3 hatcheries and 4 queens. That's okay. It's only a couple supply, and it's going to help out in one way or another. So just have extra queens ready to go for it if you want to keep with that method. Otherwise, I should say that if you don't like that method, you can just use the base camera, which is the like F5 through F8 hotkeys, and just map all your bases to those, so you can hit F5, inject, F6, inject, F7, inject, and do stuff like that instead. I want to make sure this doesn't bleed off the screen. I think I got it. Yeah, so this person says, "Good day, Magnet. I've been watching quite a bit of your videos and found them quite useful. I played Terran and I'm currently in Diamond League in the Korea region, but I'm still having trouble in TVZ defending a Roachbane attack. Some people say building siege tanks could hold it off easily, but tanks are kind of expensive, and by building 2 it would cost a set of infantry upgrades. By the way, it is quite hard to guess what the opponent would go, or it's quite hard to guess when the opponent would go aggressive, even by scouting the Roach Warren in the early game, because it could be some defensive roaches. I hope that you suggest how is the most effective way to deal with it, because almost every time after a Roach Baneling attack hits, I found that I'm on either even foot with my opponent or behind in some way. Or is it okay to build 1 or 2 tanks in every game just to be safe?" I can feel my music getting a little bit loud. Let me try to turn this down just a little bit. There we go. Hopefully that's not hurting too much. Okay, so as far as Roach Baneling attacks, they can be pretty hard to scout. The biggest thing you need to keep up on is your Hellions, just to kind of see what they're doing, especially... So here's a good way to check it out. An easy place to check to see how they're spending their larvae is to continually recheck their third base. Because if they're droning, they're going to obviously want to drone up that third base as quickly as possible. So you can keep an eye on the third base, and if you see a production round or 2 that is not drones, say they're just making roaches or units or something, that's when you should start to kind of back off a little bit, maybe add a tech lab and maybe get the 1 tank. 1 tank plus repair, pulling SCVs, and the bio that you're already going to have is actually really strong against stuff like that, especially if you can get a good tank hit on the Banelings. So try to target your tank on there. Try to use your Hellions to kill the Banelings as much as possible, because if it's just roaches against a repaired bunker and a tank, then you're going to be in really good shape. But yeah, the tank definitely is worth it, but you have to approach it as you're going to either spend the gas on a tank in order to not die, or you're going to spend the gas on infantry upgrades that'll kill you. So if you figure out what's going on, the infantry upgrades, as far as being on time, don't matter as much as getting the tank out, because the tank is going to be what keeps you alive. So I would just keep up on your scouting and mostly keep up on what's coming out of their eggs. So if you see a lot of drones, if you see production rounds of drones at the third base, you should be fine to do whatever you want. But if they are not droning their third base a lot and they're making units instead, it's pretty apparent that they're going to be using those drones, or rather using that larva to attack you rather than just make an army and sit back at their base. So yeah, just keep an eye on the drone production and be willing to make a tank or 2 if it's going to keep you alive. If you're on even footing, that's okay. At least you're alive. At least you're not dead. So yeah, I guess those are just some general tips. Let me know if you have any other further questions. That was kind of a complicated answer, but that's typically how you want to approach it. Either I can die by getting greedy and making upgrades, or I can live and be on even footing and have an extra tank or two, which will be useful later in the game. So this person says, Dear Magnet, I, main Terran, have some questions for you, and I really hope you have enough time to take these up. Let me check this one as well. I feel like this one's getting cut off. Yeah, a little bit, but I think you can read it all, so no big deal. This person says, the first question I have is what you think about Legacy of the Void expansion, how it's going to change how Terrans use a siege tank now that Zerg have the Ravagers. Sure, they can use a medevac, but still siege tank positioning will be more important than before if the enemy builds Ravagers, at least that's what I believe. And do you think that some older units will be more or less used in Legacy of the Void, and why? So, what they're trying to go for, I believe, in Legacy of the Void is discouraging really big armies winning fights. So that's why they have the Ravager, that's why they have the Disruptor, that's why they have the pickups and stuff. So if you want to stick with Terran, I think running a lot of big mech builds is going to be kind of hard. You're going to have to be aggressive in some sense or another. So either you're going to be using siege tanks a lot more for just dropping and harassing and kind of keeping drops all over the map. But as far as big blobs of units, they're really trying to discourage that as much as possible in Legacy of the Void, and that's one way that the Ravager will break your sieges a lot. But, like you said, if you do have really good micro, you could just continually put your tanks back further and further. It's a weird solution, but it could work, and they're also still filling in the holes as far as what units they're going to have for Legacy of the Void as well. So, I wouldn't worry too much about it. The Ravagers are going to be pretty strong, and justifiably so, because Zerg hasn't ever really had a good way to break positions with their units other than Swarm Hosts, which are really boring. So I think we're just going to have to wait and see. But as a general rule, having big blobs of units are going to be a lot harder to use in Legacy of the Void, and that's on purpose. So you're going to want to be thinking a lot more in Legacy of the Void like, I have this tiny little advantage, that means I need to go attack with my units. Otherwise my advantage is going to dwindle as our army sizes get more equal and as he can answer what I have. The second question is, how can I learn to efficiently counter various units? Do you have a tip to how to remember all the counters or some good website I can learn from? Also, we'll answer that really quick. Not really, you just have to play and kind of realize what counters what. I don't have like a list or a notebook or anything that tells me like Marauders counter Roaches. It's mostly just, you just know that after a certain amount of time. So just keep playing games and just keep getting used to what wins fights and what doesn't. I have some videos out there for unit compositions and what's good to counter what other composition for whatever race and whatever matchup you're playing. So you can look at those too to help you out a little bit. I also wonder how to position my siege tanks and if I should build bunkers on my natural at the high ground in my main. I'm not sure what situation you're talking about. Typically, you only build bunkers at your natural just because Terran usually gets a faster command center. And by faster, I just mean to a point where they use the bunkers or they rely on the bunkers in order to not die. So I'm not really sure what you're asking there. The only time you build bunkers in your main is if somebody was like super all-inning you, or if you were facing something like a blink all-in where you have to cover a lot of ground. They also say I wonder if I should hotkey my Marines or Marauders if the enemy is building High Templars or Banelings, and the same goes for Reapers in case I would like to split them up. You should hotkey stuff however you're comfortable with. So if you want to split up your Marines and Marauders on different hotkeys, that's okay, but most of the time it's better to have them kind of mixed together as they would be, because you're going to be doing mostly mouse control to try and split them up and stuff. As far as hotkeying Reapers, you could probably hotkey your ones if you're using them as scout and stuff like that, but splitting up Reapers is not going to usually net a lot of payoff. You'll typically lose both of them a lot more often than you'll just do a lot of damage with both of them. Alright, this person says, as a Protoss, I'm silver in ladder, but I can't progress, which makes me really frustrated. From what I can see, 100% of the time if I'm against Zerg, he will 6 or 9 pool. If he's a Protoss, it will Cannon Rush or Stalker Rush. And if he's Terran, I will get hit by a random, I think that means stim timing, and a lot of Marauders. One time I made a 13 gate immediate Zealot, but Zergling still got in my base before the Zealot was out. I can use my Mothership Overcharge, stuff like that. So basically what he's saying is that he plays on ladder a lot and he gets cheesed a lot, which is common because a lot of people want to just get free and cheap wins instead of learning the entire intricacies of the whole game. So this can be really hard to deal with. I do have some videos about defending cheese, so you'll want to check those out. Check out the Protoss playlist, and there's the videos about defending cheese, I believe, in every matchup. For the most part, just having a build that has certain timings where you can switch what you're doing at a right time will hold off most of these, but a lot of it is about just experience and getting used to what they do, and a lot of it also is about judging what they can possibly have at what time. So, say Zerg opens up with a 6 pool, you know that the fastest he could possibly get to your base is, like 3 minutes or 3 minutes and 30 seconds. Depends on the map, and it depends on your spawn positions and all sorts of other variables, but you know that if he does everything perfectly, the fastest he can be there is by whatever time. So then you have to judge, what can I possibly have done by the time he gets to my base that would give me an advantage? So, for example, if it were a Zerg and he was 6 pooling, if you had a cannon done in your mineral line, there's no way he'll ever be able to make enough Zerglings before you can make enough units along with the cannon to be just fine. Same thing with a cannon rush. Like, if you can get a stalker out, or if you can kill the probe, he can't advance any cannons any further. Or a lot of times with other things like cannon rush, you can just ignore it and build another base and say, well, you spent 600 minerals killing a 400 mineral nexus, so I'll just make another one and I'll just be ahead, and I'm going to go kill you at your base because you don't have anything at your base. So there's a lot of circumstances like that, and I talk about them in those videos. So look up the Protoss playlist and check those out. This person says, usually when I play TVP, the storms are a mid and late game option. They'll have like 10 High Templar and a ton of Stalkers. They pretty much just A-click my base. I try to back off if they get close, but they'll keep moving towards me. Since the High Templar count is so high, it's basically impossible to wait out the storms. I try Ghosts, but their army is too big to properly EMP without losing everything. What do I do? So you should only base your EMP usage off of trying to hit the High Templar, because if you are able to hit the High Templar so that they can't storm, and if they, like you said, I'm just going to go based off what you said, if they only have Stalkers and High Templar, and he has no storms, the Stalkers are awful and they will die in no time. So all you have to really do is just target the important things. So if they have like Colossus as well, and you have like 15 Vikings, just target the Vikings on the Colossus and pick off as many as you can. Try to EMP the Templar as best you can, and then fight when they don't have all that splash damage. So you mostly need to think about not EMPing their whole army. It's just trying to EMP the Templar, and there's kind of a little dance that you can play. You can wait for all their Templar to be grouped up. You can try and flank with Ghosts. I have videos about how to use Ghosts and how to deal with High Templar storms and stuff as well, so look it up in the Terran playlist. This person says, what do you think about the Terran Scan and Nidus Worm combo? And 2v2 it seems OP. People do that to me sometimes. Yeah, there's a lot of overpowered stuff in 2v2. It's impossible to balance 2v2, so you're going to see a lot of weird stuff. For the most part, just try to run builds that are fairly defensive, that get a lot of units before getting really super fast expansions, unless you can scout out what your opponent's doing. But yeah, it's mostly just about awareness, but you just also have to accept the fact that 2v2 is not, or team games in general, are typically not balanced. This person says, I've been seeing a lot of people in PvP going for an early Stargate and a Phoenix for harassment, and I'm not sure what to do against it as they just keep picking off units and probes and microed correctly. So you basically have to either, if you're opening Stargate, you just have to get more Phoenix and you win, or if you're not, then you have to put a lot of Stalkers in each mineral line, and then you can replace those with cannons. And a really popular way to kill somebody that's using a lot of Phoenix is just to kill them with a huge blink timing. So if they get up to like 6 or 7 Phoenix and you're on 2 bases and you have 6 or 7 gateways, you can usually just blink them to death. Or if it's just 1 base versus 1 base and they start making Phoenix and you already have blink done, it's rare that they're going to have enough to be able to hold off and attack. That can be a little bit flimsy. You can also do things like Templar and try to feedback the Phoenix, but it's a little bit less reliable. For the most part, you just need to get blink out, and you need to be able to blink on top of their Phoenix, or punish them for doing a build that ignores the threat of your blink as well. And I talk about stuff like that in the Protoss playlist as well, so I don't think I specifically talk about how to handle Stargate openers, but there's a few PvP videos that were all mentioned, little tidbits about it, and you can check it out, but I kind of just summarize a lot about it too. Alright, I think this is the last one. Yep. This person says, in IEM Katowice, I've seen Dark use Corruptors and Lingbane versus Terran Bio. I'm pretty bad at keeping Mutalisk busy, so can Corruptors be a better choice for me? Yeah, this is cool. Dark has kind of innovated this whole Corruptor usage against Terran, And the cool thing about it is because if he lives long enough and he ever gets a hive up, he can just make broodlords, and the Terran has to dramatically switch what they're doing. They can't just keep going marine mine and all that stuff that they can do against ultralisks. So it's cool. This is a lot less maintenance that you're going to need to defeat these armies. And the best part is that you're forcing them to keep spending extra gas and keep spending extra minerals on replacing their medevacs, whereas Mulists aren't nearly as good at doing that. Another, I guess, side effect is that Corruptors can eat a lot more damage from Marines, so it's not like you're going to be, if you accidentally fly your Mutacloud over their army, you're just going to be dead. Because Corruptors, you're not going to be exploring like that usually. So if you're bad at keeping Mulists busy, or if you don't have the multitasking required to get the most out of those mutas, then yeah, you can run the Corruptor Lingbane stuff. You should be okay with it. Just keep in mind that Dark and Life and all the really top Zergs, they do really well at handling Widow Mines. So the bulk of your army is going to be Lingbane as far as killing off their army. So you need to make sure that you're not just moving your entire army into a field of Widow Mines. Just send them in little bits at a time and try to decompose his army with good Baneling hits. And then the Corruptors will really go to work on their medevacs and stuff. Okay, that's it, guys. Thanks for hanging out. Leave a question on any video if you want me to answer it. And I usually, instead of answering the question on the video, I'll just do it, or rather in the comments, I'll just do it in this one so you guys can get a better and more well thought answer instead of me just having, you know, a few characters to say, yay, this is what you do. So yeah, hope you guys enjoyed it. I'll be back really soon with more videos, so check them out in the near future. But until then, more questions. I'll answer them later. Take care.